Okay. All right. Thanks everyone for coming at short notice. Really excited to be able to host Michael Garfield here at Commonwealth Bank. I was very fortunate to share a stage with Michael at Rainbow Serpent Festival only a week ago, or I can't remember how long it's been now. I sort of sat there, I was there to be the resident futurist, and I sat there and basically every time he opened his mouth I was like, why am I even bothering? This guy is just so many levels above what I could ever hope to be. He's trained as a paleontologist. He then decided to explore poetry, futurism, techno-philosophy, painting, and music. And I got to experience some of his music last night in Leichhardt, and it was really quite special. He's got all his equipment here today, so maybe if we get him drunk enough, maybe we can get him to play some tunes later on. But for the time being, we're focusing just on the talking aspect of Michael Garfield's skills. So he's going to do a little talk to get us started, to get our brains sort of working, and then we'll do a bit of sort of fireside discussion, techno fireside discussion, and then we'll open up for Q&A. So without further ado, welcome Michael Garfield.
Yeah, thank you. Did not expect to be here today. This is really cool. I ordinarily I'm giving talks like this within a festival environment, so I'm actually the techiest dude in a scene of very artistic, counterculture type people. So this is exciting for me because now I get to be the weird guy. But actually, Andrew tells me that this is after all the Innovation Lab, and that all of you are very divergent thinkers. So I'm excited to see what happens here, because most of the talks that I give tend to be very free roaming and associative as a performance of the new kind of networked identities and states of consciousness that I think are our destiny as human beings. I've actually prepared this. This is a 5-minute slideshow I did for a series of flash presentations in Austin, Texas, where I'm from. This was part of an Ignite freelance talks. So ordinarily I would not try to present this kind of material so rapidly and so densely, and I stay the hell away from slideshows. But because we're here, we might as well go on it. So this is a 20 slides at 15 seconds a slide on a topic that I intentionally made as challenging to people as I could: technology ethics as psychedelic parenting. So let us begin. We know, first of all, that technology is inherently psychoactive as an extension of our minds, as an idea that has become a thing, that everything that we create ends up becoming part of a technological, cultural ecosystem that then influences the development of individual minds and of culture that comes down the line. So, this is, it's a little uncanny how well Arthur C. Clarke nailed the impact of the mysterious high-tech slab. Remember, Arthur C. Clarke is the one that said, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And as it happens, this is a fairly well-established relationship between the psychedelic technology and the influence of non-ordinary states of consciousness, peak experiences, not necessarily psychedelic, but nonetheless what psychotherapist Stan Grof called non-ordinary states, and the divergent thought and creative thinking that comes from those states. There's both the historian Fred Turner, in several of his works, have well documented this intimate relationship dating all the way back to the simultaneous invention of LSD and the atom bomb, and the consequence of the atom bomb on our understanding of the planet as a single interwoven system. Timothy Leary, noted psychedelic guru, pointed specifically to personal computing as a psychoactive technology. And in a way, a lot of our technologies, especially information technologies, are the fruition or realization of long-standing mythical tropes that we have, the magic mirror or the magic pool, or that typically magical objects of some kind connect us to invisible agencies and intelligences that provide us with what you would call transhuman now, but what historically has been called magical abilities. Scholar Richard Doyle at Pennsylvania State University actually points to the relationship dating back hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years, between these psychoactive non-ordinary states of consciousness and the evolution of language, and specifically the theory of language, the synesthetic origins of language, that there is new connections in the brain formed between our gestures, the movement of our mouths, different regions of the brain that are visual and auditory cortices, and that the increase in functional connectivity between brain regions, I'll skip forward just a moment here to show you, this is the functional connectivity between brain regions in the brain of an ordinary waking state person and then someone under the influence of psilocybin or magic mushrooms. So what we're seeing here is something like how the relaxation of inhibition between motifs and brain regions is leading to a kind of brain intranet that seems to have contributed substantially to the development of what we now know as modern normal human intelligence. Specifically, one of the characteristics of this experience is the inhibition or deactivation of what neuroscientists call the default mode network, which is responsible for separating out self and other, and also like defining the boundary between self, and also stitching together experiences into an episodic and autobiographical memory. So this is the story that we tell about ourselves, that we extract from the raw data of our experience, which is, in final calculations, a profound oversimplification of what's really going on in the world. And we know this increasingly to be the case over the last 50 to 100 years of science, converging from ecology, neuroscience, depth psychology, all of these different fields, showing how cybernetics, Gregory Bateson, one of the founders of cybernetics, talked about the mind as the mind at large. That mind emerges through relationships. And so each of us, especially as social creatures, are networked beings. We exist always within a culture, within a community, within a technological surround, and our identity is extracted or precipitates out of that. So, here we are. And again, here, we got a magic mirror, and what once was the dragon on the edge of the map is now the dragon in the map, in Google Maps on our phone. We have sort of replaced our geographic frontier with an interior frontier. And as science has now turned inwards to examine the properties of the human mind, it's funny how these historical tropes, to me, continue to assert themselves. As just another example, here on the left is the World Wide Web, or rather a map of the World Wide Web that's a few years old. On the right, we have a map of the recently discovered and studied Wood Wide Web. This is the relationships between different species of plants and fungi living in a forest ecosystem. As it happens, the above ground trees that we see, this set of individual entities that we have historically observed is not the whole truth any more than each of us can be isolated. No man is an island, no tree is an island. As it happens, the entire wood can in some sense be understood as a single living creature that is bound by nutrient and other chemical transportation systems underground through a mycelial network. So when we get to this point where the dragon and the tiger at the edge of the map have been folded over by our technological embrace, this paving over everything with the Internet of Things. We're now living in an age that geologists recognize as the Anthropocene. This is the age that is actually formally defined by stratigraphers as the period of Earth's history where human beings are now the dominant force of geological activity on the surface of this planet. There is one mine in Canada that now moves more earth every year than all of erosion on the surface of the planet. And if we are to be accurate in our estimation of what this actually means, it doesn't exclusively mean that we are the dominant species per se, because after all, 90% of the genetic material in your body is non-human. It's you, each of us, is a massive collaboration of different forms of microorganisms. And likewise, the sort of not entirely intentional spread of human technology and culture over the surface of the planet is, in some sense, and perhaps in the more accurate sense, a function of geological activity, a function of physics, of the entropic process of sunlight being processed through metabolisms and leading to an increase in entropy overall, that the internet, as technologist Kevin Kelly has argued in his book What Technology Wants, is in some sense inevitable. It's not to say that the iPhone was inevitable, but that the crystallization of ever more effective structures for the dissipation of energy and information leads to situations like the one that we have now, where hypersocial organisms web themselves ever more intimately to the point where we end up with a planet-spanning infrastructure. So now that we are here in this position as a keystone species, what are we doing? We have this profound responsibility that we're only now becoming aware of, and this is where the sort of heady part of this becomes a more kind of holistic and honestly a heart-centered question. We get into the ethics of what it means to be responsible for the technologies that we create. Do we want to be good parents? Do we want, in what ways are we allowing our creations to run amok with our own, as a consequence of our own limited ability to oversee and foresee the consequences of our actions? This is no joke, folks. Fiction has become fact. Geneticists are now working on reactivating some of the dormant genes in a chicken, turning the teeth, the claws back on in a chicken. It's the year of the rooster, so this is kind of a good time for this. But I mean, we really are at a point now where the latency between the idea and the technology that idea inspires is getting narrower and narrower. And so if you are I understand Jason Silva has spoken here. Jason's very fond of reminding people that we are becoming gods. If we are becoming gods, the big question is what kind of creators do we choose to be? What kind of creators do we want to be? We have a responsibility to making sure that we instantiate good ideas and that we collaborate in ways that provide the correct swarm intelligence and or regulatory oversight to prevent godlike evil from being executed on the surface of this planet. Somebody who's done more than almost anyone to propose this kind of idea is the roboticist Hans Moravec. This is his book, Mind Children. And if you want to apply this metaphor of parenting to technology, then it becomes very clear that this is not ultimately about a program of godlike control over nature as much as our desire to control the situation, the chaotic circumstances of our lives seems to be motivating all of our innovation. The fact of it is that every idea is released into the wild as soon as it's communicated and takes on a life of its own. And the best thing that we can really hope for is that we have programmed the idea, the rhetoric around these ideas, the way that they're discussed, and that we work together to raise our technologies well. Again, here is some of you may already be familiar with Bina 48. This is Martine Rothblatt's wife, Bina Rothblatt. Martine was the inventor of Sirius XM radio, transgender richest woman in the world right now, if I'm not mistaken. And her wife, Bina, is being gradually side-loaded, by which I mean templated according to the exhaust of her data through internet use, recorded conversations, etc., into this android that is effectively asymptotically approaching a convincing replica of this woman, so that Martine Rothblatt's book, Virtual Immortality, discusses how each of us is right now in the process of seeding the internet with the necessary substrate for a mind clone running on mindware. So that this isn't cut your head off and scan it into a computer. This is the near future scenario in which it's not just uploading your dimensions into a fashion app. It's your Facebook profile and all of your Google searches, being able to create a digital simulacrum that allows you to interface with the internet in a new way, basically creating a dual platform identity. And so, I mean, this is already the case. All of us, the United States Supreme Court a couple of years ago actually issued a statement on the cell phone basically being a part of your body now, and that legally we have to start treating every human being as a cyborg, meaning a cybernetic input-output system, a composite identity. This is a movement away from this sort of atomic, discrete, particular notion of the self to this networked identity that I mentioned earlier. Again, when our ideas can so rapidly become things, we have to be really careful what images and what the way that we structure our communication around this stuff. Right now, it's the change is so rapid, the transformation so accelerated, that it's easy for us to slide back into anxiety about the pace of the modern world. But again, mythology provides us with a cautionary tale here. This is Goya's pattern painting Saturn eating his children, the ancient Greek myth of the Titans resisting the influx of a new order of creation. Again, you could look to Christian mythology for this as well, with the rebel angels resisting humankind. If we look at the evolution of life and intelligence as the forces of entropy guiding ever better information compression algorithms and ever more effective metabolisms, then it's safe to see how this movement from the base, like stars and the basic forces, which could be understood in a mystical way as the way that ancient peoples related to and understood, angels, not as a literal thing, but as a sort of proto-physics. And then this compresses into what we understand as biological life, and biological life compresses yet again into these systems like economist Robin Hanson and his book, The Age of M, talking about emulating entire human beings on computers and the impending population explosion of digital beings that we can expect. It's probably unwise for us to resist this. We don't want to be this guy. And so how do we navigate in a world where the change is so rapid that the stable identities that we clung to through the previous media ecology of print no longer suffice, that we recognize that we are networked identities? For this, although this is not obviously this is not the only strategy, there are quite a few people out there in the world working on psychological harm reduction in these non-ordinary states of consciousness that are, according to people like the author Richard Doyle, when he says that the psychedelic state is sort of a rehearsal for the transhuman state of being. So we might be able to look to the psychedelic revolution of the 1960s, how these people are mitigating the difficult experiences that can happen when your conscious and your unconscious mind collide against one another, and all of this material that you have repressed suddenly becomes something that you struggle to manage. So we get into these spaces where basically what strategies already exist for surfing this sort of rapid and extraordinary change, and basically if we want to prevent technology from creating a planet-wide bad trip, we should possibly be looking to these people for some advice. I think it's fair to say that a lot of the anxiety surrounding this is due to the way that media has shortened our time horizon, the way that the attention-grabbing quality of engineered social media and technologies is giving us a sort of collective amnesia about just how many times we've been through this before in one way or another. I mean, if you were to actually go back into the historical literature, people responded with the same kind of trepidation to radio communication, to print media, to the written word. Each of these is sort of a singularity in the sense that before the written word, no one could have anticipated the way that would have transformed our culture, and yet here we are still. Some of the oldest written language that we have is cuneiform tablets saying everything is going to hell in a handbasket, the end is near. And that was 5,000 years ago. So what is the alternative? The alternative, which of course, again, if you're considering technology in the parenting metaphor, the alternative is to consider our responsibility as ancestors to a world that we can't understand or predict. The responsibility is to looking at the potentials of the Internet of Things and generally the convergence of biological and technological life as a kind of, as having a potential for a species-wide planetary cathedral building project. It's the thing about these ages of extraordinary wealth, like 13th century Europe, where there was this boom of affluence. What did people do with all of their additional resources? What are we going to do with all of the additional resources that we generate through this exponential explosion of what Peter Diamandis at Singularity University talks as superabundance? Well, I can't think of anything better to do with it than to build beautiful and life-affirming things and to leave a positive trace on our future, to be remembered as good ancestors. And I think that by holding this in our minds, by remembering that we are a part of a process that began long before human beings and will continue long after human beings, of finding a continuity, of extending our now to include a deeper past and a deeper future, that we can lift ourselves out of the fear and anxiety of our limbic overstimulation and start to reflect on our place in the cosmic scheme of things, which is actually not a new idea. This is something that has been characteristic. Temple building, in whatever sense, has been characteristic of the heights of all human civilizations. So my advice in that regard is to look at what we're building as the platform for new layers of meta-organismal identities beyond our geographic or blood relations, beyond the relations of our ideas, reaching past that to understand ourselves as something that the Earth is doing, that the entire cosmos, in fact, is doing, and to participate in this process intentionally, rather than continuing to merely project our own literalized spiritual aspirations for control into this world, because obviously if we do that, our children will buck that control. So it's better to work with the change rather than against it, and that's where I'll leave it for now. I think that, that hopefully that's dredged up a bunch of interesting ideas, and we can take it any way you want. So thanks.
Okay.